As we get into episode 5, spoilers abound. Martin Webster 2 episodes ago said about Cecily. He said she'll be found dead, 6 feet underground in the middle of the woods, with a rope around her neck. Alan Conway based a character on Martin Webster in his book, Atticus Takes the Case. He created a funhouse version of Martin Webster, a more attractive and successful version of Martin Webster. He made him Dr. Collins in the novel. Dr. Collins killed Melissa James. Has Martin Webster, who's now threatening Susan's life, killed Cecily? Questions were answered in episode 5. But why did Atticus kill John Spencer? Who killed Cecily? Do you know? Let's solve Moonflower Murders, episode 5. The Endicotts reveal someone had a motive to kill Cecily. We'll be breaking down each episode for clues, suspects, and red herrings on the hunt to learn all the dang questions, plus why did Atticus kill John Spencer? Spoilers for the first 5 episodes of Moonflower Murders. If you haven't seen all these episodes, pause this video, kick a writer out of your house, and then come back and watch. Use the timestamps below to jump to the topic or suspect that you want to hear and skip past things you don't want to hear. At the end of this podcast, I'll review the latest feedback from you, our listeners, as well as talk about how, when I read the novel, how I solved the Melissa James murder really quick and how it ties into some Agatha Christie solutions that you want to be aware of moving forward. We're going to wrap up Moonflower Murders next week, but know that coming in 2025, it'll be the Mabel Hall Murders, the brand new 3rd book in this series about Atticus and Susan Ryland. Here's the description. It's coming out next year. Hopefully you don't consider this description from the publisher a spoiler, but I want to read it to you. Susan Ryland has had enough of murder. She was the editor of the famous detective Atticus novels, and twice she's come close to being killed. Now Susan's back in England, and she's been persuaded to work on a new Atticus book. This new continuation novel is by Elliot Crace, the grandson of Miriam Crace, who was the biggest-selling children's author in the world until her death exactly 20 years ago. Elliot believes that Miriam was deliberately poisoned, and when he tells Susan that he has hidden the identity of Miriam's killer inside his book, Susan knows that she's in trouble once again. As Susan works on this continuation novel, Poon's Last Case, a story set in an exotic villa in the south of France, she uncovers more and more parallels between the past and the present, the fictional and the real world, until suddenly she finds she has become a target herself. It seems someone in Elliot's family doesn't want the book to be written, and they will do anything to prevent it. Ooh. Oh boy, I already have a suspect in the 20-year-old murder case. How about you? Are you excited? Do you read these books or you just wait for the adaptations, which I assume we'll be getting in 2 years? Let me know down in the comments on YouTube. Go down there and give me your thoughts, your suspects. Let's hear it. As well as if you're on audio podcast, please check us out on our social media sites at PHQ on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Facebook.com/PHQ. We love talking to members of the Clue Crew. And members of the Clue Crew, I've said it before, but YouTube and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, they beat me up. They send me these notifications that say, hey, 64% of the people who watch and listen to these podcasts are not subscribed. We are having a subscriber goal here in 2024. If you could please subscribe, it would mean the world to us. It costs you nothing. We are trying to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2024, and if you could support us, that'd be great. If you've already subscribed, I want to thank you from the Moonflower and Barn Owl wing of the hotel. Thank you so much. Before we run down the suspects, let's see what episode 5 taught us about the real-life story and the missing person / possibly murdered person, Cecily Treherne. A creepy hand is shown in the forest with a wedding ring. Cecily's ring. A body has been found. It's believed to be Cecily in the forest. The police bring Cecily's necklace in. The person, the dead body, has been strangled, just like Melissa James in the novel. Turning to our murder victim from 8 years ago, Frank Parris, I'm not sure this episode taught us much more about Frank other than what we learned about some of the people around Frank. Now let's look at the suspects in the real-life cases, and everyone, I mean everyone, is under a great deal of stress, including our lead detective, Susan. She begins the episode honking at traffic. She's stressed. Her nephew is avoiding her questions. Her sister is going through a painful divorce, and Susan is trying to get into Frank Parris's old room and being thwarted. If that wasn't enough, Martin Webster drives her off the road trying to kill her. She does have a bit of support. Andreas has returned to England following her. He's a bit jealous of where she was the night before, but he's going to be where she is. Are you glad that Andreas and Susan are seemingly back together? Let's hear it down in the comments. Cecily's father, the hotel owner Lawrence Treherne. Lawrence, how do you read this? He doesn't have much of a reaction to the news that his daughter is believed dead. Earlier in the episode, Lawrence had interrupted Susan going into Frank Parris's old room. Why had he stopped her? Lawrence has hired multiple people to work at his hotel who've had past criminal offenses. And if we can believe Liam, he hires them because it's cheap labor to keep the hotel running. And Lawrence wasn't paying Stefan much of any salary. Cecily's mother, Pauline Treherne. When Detective Locke shows up at the hotel, Pauline immediately knows that Cecily is dead. Is this just kind of grief coming up, or did she know her daughter was dead ahead of time? Cecily's sister, Lisa. Lisa is ice cold after the news comes down that her sister is dead. She is kicking Susan out. She is brutal. She is chilly. According to Liam, Lisa was hooking up with Stefan in secret. The night before Frank Parris was killed, Lisa fired Stefan. Stefan has later gone on and confessed to the crime of killing Frank Parris. Lisa and Stefan's relationship, if there was one, was described as strictly physical, and Liam claims he and Lisa are now hooking up. Cecily's husband, Aiden. We don't see much of Aiden in episode 5. We see him comforting his daughter. Ooh, that's tough. And later, he breaks down when Detective Locke tells him the news about Cecily. Hotel manager Derek Endicott. When Susan comes to his house, he's still sleeping. We're told it's because he was working the overnight shift at the hotel. Derek didn't like Alan Conway at all, and with his mother, he tossed Alan Conway out of his house. Is that why Alan Conway created such an ugly character in the novel based on Derek? Derek's mother, Gwyneth. We find out Gwyneth suffered a heart attack 2 years back. Unlike the character Phyllis in the novel, Gwyneth is very nice. She loves her son Derek. She says Aiden and Cecily have been looking after her in her old age. The one person she hasn't liked is Alan Conway because she didn't want him to record her conversations. She didn't want to talk about Frank Parris's murder at all. Stefan the Confessor. Stefan, if we can trust Liam, he wasn't making much money while working at Branlow Hall. Stefan apparently was also miserable when he was around Lisa, even though he was hooking up with her, possibly because he was a convict who needed a job. Hotel worker Liam Corby is really giving a lot of information. Can we trust it? We find out Liam has a criminal record in Australia. He was getting his clients illegal steroids. He spent 6 months in prison. Liam is the one really pointing the finger at Lisa. Liam, it's important to note, Liam refers to Cecily in the past tense when he's talking to Susan. He says Cecily was okay. This is before we know that Cecily may be dead in the forest. A couple of weeks before the murder of Frank Parris, Liam saw Stefan and Lisa having a night of passion in the woods. Frank Parris's sister, Joanna Webster. The Websters, not shocking based on what we've seen, they don't invite people over like the Endicotts. They stay to themselves. Joanna, she didn't want her husband to do anything about Susan, but her husband did not listen. Martin Webster, he knows his way around the hotel. He was doing a laundry business at the hotel, seemingly when Frank Parris was a guest there. His laundry business did the sheets and towels, until recently Cecily fired him. When Susan confronts him, he doesn't want to talk about why he and Cecily argued. He slams the door in Susan's face. Later, Martin drives Susan off the road. Susan's sister, Katie. Now this is really sad and kind of emotional. Katie's husband has left her 6 months ago. Not only was he fooling around behind her back in London, he stole from the company where he was working on, and now she's forced to sell her house. Katie is doing rough. She doesn't want any sympathy. Hey, I'm not giving any sympathy, Katie. It's fine. Katie is also a Susan Andreas shipper, so she may be happy that they're back together, seemingly. Now let's go to an imaginary 1954 in the village of Tawley and talk about the novel Atticus Poon Takes the Case. We find out in this episode who killed actress Melissa James, who is again based on Cecily's sister Lisa. Melissa was killed by her secret lover, Dr. Collins. Now, Melissa's husband was stabbed, and it doesn't seem like Dr. Collins stabbed him. John Spencer went upstairs to get his coat and shoes, then he stabbed himself. Atticus points out the dagger, the knife, was at the bottom of the stairs. Did he grab the knife, go to the top of the stairs, put on his coat and shoes, and then stab himself? Or did he go upstairs, get his coat and shoes, come down, grab the knife, then walk back up and stab himself? To Atticus, it doesn't make sense. Taking a look at the suspects in the novel, Atticus Poon himself has claimed that he killed John Spencer. Atticus also solved the Melissa James murder. Secretary Madelaine Cain was fainting just a couple episodes ago. Now, after having a bloody man die in her arms, she seems to be ready to get out of town. Melissa James' financial advisor, Algernon Marsh, who was based off the real-life Aiden MacNeil. Algernon admits, or lies, that the Melissa love letter was addressed to him. Algernon's cigarette was found at the scene of the hit-and-run crime. Oh boy, what a fool. When he was cornered about the man he hit with his car, Algernon kind of didn't have a care in the world. He thought it was nothing, mainly because he thought he'd be getting his sister's big inheritance. That sister is Samantha Collins. Samantha wonders if accepting this inheritance money is the right idea when it could go to the poor and the needy. Samantha, with no husband and a brother in prison, you're going to need all that money. Share some with charity, sure, but take it all. Samantha was still a bit cold and judgy. She blamed Melissa partially for the affairs and Melissa's weakness. Dr. Leonard Collins. Boy, it must be terrible living in Tawley. He was willing to get out of it. He was going to have an affair with an actress and escape the city. Then when he found out how much money his wife was going to inherit, he killed the actress and then tried to return to the wife and all that money. I'm not sure they actually had much physical evidence that could convict him, but he confessed, so won't be much of a trial for Dr. Collins. Detective Inspector Chubb. Now, Chubb believes that John Spencer stabbed himself after being caught for Melissa's death, but Poon has rocked his world. What do you think? Do you have an idea who killed John Spencer? All right, let's get to your feedback. A true lead detective in this Clue Crew community. Lauren had some great feedback. I'm going to pull my favorite bit of her stuff. Lauren wrote, odd things I've noticed thus far in Moonflower Murders. In the novel section of the show, from the first episode on, I keep noticing images of lions. Plus, there's a license plate on a car that pretty much reads Lion 5, and that was from Algernon, who did the hit and run. Melissa James' home even has a picture of the cowardly lion from the real-life Wizard of Oz movie. I can't help but think one of these Easter egg clues is meant for the viewer to figure out. I also wonder if there are multiple murderers because there are multiple lions. In fact, that license plate does read lions plural, not lion singular. Ooh, such a good eye. My lips are sealed. Somebody, I hope this handle is correct. It's PMMM. Pim. They wrote, may I suggest that Miss Cain was the lover that the handwritten note from Melissa James was meant for? She put on an act so she could stay behind and take something from Melissa's room. Now that's good. Now we do find out, I'm pretty sure in this episode, that the handwritten note was for Dr. Collins, but I love looking at all suspects, including Atticus Poon's assistant. Very good. This feedback from Shirley said, I'm truly enjoying this show. Man, I'm glad you're enjoying it, Shirley. I think this episode was really strong, episode 5. We got a couple of people who were not fans of the Susan storyline. J.K. wrote, not a fan of Susan Strang's storyline, and it's made much worse by the phone call the next day. Sandy D. also wrote, yeah, I'm not feeling Susan's storyline. But I do love this feedback from Cheryl, which says, I agree with Susan, comma, romance novels are a weak link for strong women. Heck yeah, all right, Cheryl. All right, let me go ahead and put a button on this Agatha Christie hint that I've been talking about the last couple of video podcasts. Really, it's just if you read enough Agatha Christie novels, now not some of the big famous ones they make movies out of, but if you read enough Agatha Christie novels, you'll note that a lot of times when there's like, this crime took place between noon and 12:30, you should really look close and at least open your mind to the possibility, well, what if it took place before noon or after 12:30? Then your mind suddenly goes to things like, well, gee, who told us that this happened at 12:30? Did that 12:30 time come from a testimony? Is that testimony from the killer themselves? And so because I recognize this so much, almost immediately when I was reading this novel, Moonflower Murders, when Melissa James was killed, I was like, oh, it's the doctor. Like it was so Agatha Christie to a T, and I don't want to say which Agatha Christie novels because I don't want anybody to be spoiled if they haven't read them, but like I was on Dr. Collins almost immediately. And I think it's a good twist. I think, just like I said earlier, there aren't a lot of physical clues to tie him. Like I'm not sure a jury would have enough to go on if Dr. Collins hadn't confessed. But for me as a reader, and certainly as a show watcher, my eye was on Dr. Collins immediately. That said, I did solve most of the other crimes in this book, but they took a bit slower, and I wonder if you guys have solved them. Once again, is that Cecily in the woods? If so, who killed her? Why? These kind of things. It took me a bit longer in the book. Have you solved them? Please go down in the comments on YouTube. Let me know. I love hearing from you. I read every comment I get. Also, comments on social media. That's at DoublePHQ on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, Facebook.com/DoublePHQ. I call our community the Clue Crew because it's really fun. You guys are what make this succeed. Next week, we're going to talk up and wrap up the series with episode 6. Susan and Andreas visit Stefan in prison. Will Susan solve Cecily's mysterious disappearance? Ooh, it's going to be a fun final episode. Also, please subscribe if you can. It would mean so much. Talk to you next week.